In 1994, Larry Proctor, the owner of a small seed company, bought a bag of bean seeds in Mexico. He then brought the yellow-colored seeds back to America and planted them to find out if they were good plants. To his delight, the beans surpassed all of his expectations, proving to be robust and consistent when yielding crops. He then applied for a US patent and obtained it, giving him a legal monopoly over all yellow beans sold in the United States. What you probably didn't know about this great company story is that these Mexican yellow beans have been grown in Mexico for centuries, developed by generations of Mexican farmers and plant breeders. Under the terms of this patent, he could sue anyone in the United States who sold or grew a bean that he considered his particular shade of yellow. He also profited from yellow beans imported from Mexico by imposing a 6 cent per pound royalty. The patent sparked controversy and spite among the Hopi and Zuni tribes who had long relied on the beans as a vital source of income. Their outcry reverberated across the Mexican land, culminating in a settlement that greatly affected their livelihoods. This injustice is one of the hundreds of lawsuits where corporations and institutions have claimed natural compounds and substances as their own and hijacked the knowledge of how to use them. This is biopiracy. According to Conversation.com, biopiracy has its roots in colonialism. During the age of colonialism, many European powers engaged in pursuits of wealth and power, often at the expense of indigenous people and their territory. This meant natural resources, plants, animals, and minerals were exploited and used for economic dominance. Traditional knowledge, passed down through generations, were appropriated and commodified, stripped of its cultural context, and repackaged for mass consumption. One example can be seen with this notorious British East India Company, or BEIC, with the reign from 1600 to 1874. According to Yes magazine, the BEIC possessed and exploited over $45 trillion worth of India's land, food, water, and forests. One way they did this is by monopolizing vital commodities like tea, spices, and textiles, allowing the company to control the production, distribution, and even pricing of these goods, often to the detriment of local producers and economies. This caused Indian artisans and manufacturers to sell the goods to the company at a very low price and buy British goods at higher and more inflated rates. They also used Indian techniques and expertise without providing fair compensation nor recognition to these local communities. This case exemplifies how biopiracy perpetuates economic exploration and erodes the economy of communities that rely on traditional farming. There are other problems as well. I also want to talk about bioprospecting, a practice very close to biopiracy. Bioprospecting, as said by the United Nations, is defined as a systematic search for biochemical and genetic information to develop commercially valuable products. This describes companies or organizations that try to search for new natural substances to put in their products. Imagine if you were to pick up any food item from the grocery store and look at its list of ingredients. You'll often find a long list of substances with some names that look like they were discovered in like a chemistry lab. These ingredients are as a result of bioprospecting. The impact of biopiracy on the environment cannot be understated. Forests and rich habitats all fall prey to biopiracy, causing indiscriminate exploitation of these resources. The ecosystems rich in biological materials and medicinal herbs captivate the eyes of biopiracy, leading to overharvesting, habitat deconstruction, and endangerment of species, causing irreparable damage to the ecosystem. The Food and Agriculture Organization states that over 90% of crop varieties have disappeared from farmers' fields globally in the last century. Biopiracy exploits these plants, causing the loss of traditional crops, leading to an increased reliance on synthetic alternatives that often have detrimental environmental impacts. The most common way biopiracy is conducted is through patents. Patents grant exclusive rights to the patent holder, which can restrict access to and use of genetic resources. This creates a barrier to further research, development, and innovation while inhibiting the sharing of benefits with communities from which these materials were derived from. It is also considered very ethically sound and good for the public to do. Now let's delve into the ethical considerations and issues. Imagine your grandmother has a secret family recipe for a special herbal tea blend that she's been making for generations. It's a cherished tradition in your family, and everybody and your friends gather to her house to enjoy that great tea. Now, what would happen if a large corporation were to discover the recipe and decide to patent the blend of herbs and spices? Not only would your grandmother not be able to make it anymore, but she would have to pay money to buy it just for her own use. Wouldn't that be unfair? Biopiracy can lead to the unauthorized use of genetic resources, undermining biodiversity, conservation efforts, and exacerbating social and economic inequalities. There's a big need for ethical standards to regulate these activities due to the unpredictable efforts on ecosystems and biological diversity, especially when the entire goal of biopiracy is to exploit indigenous people of their resources. Many people fall back into the ethical considerations and they're like, wait, this is such a bad thing. Why is this even happening? Now, you're probably wondering, this is such a terrible issue. How is it still going on? Why hasn't the government stepped in? I want to start this segment by saying that the US is not entirely convinced of the existence of this phenomenon termed as biopiracy. Many of the legislative actions concerning intellectual property rights and monopolies may indirectly address these related issues, but don't explicitly target biopiracy or bioprospecting. Although the earlier property rights favored corporations, the US has since changed these to include different legal pathways to rebalance the intellectual property system in favor of indigenous people and local communities. One of these ways is through the Nagoya Protocol. It has a longer name that I'll put on screen, but I'm not going to say all of that. Essentially, the protocol aims to ensure fair and equitable sharing of benefits from genetic resources, promoting biodiversity conservation. It establishes rules for accessing genetic resources requiring prior informed consent, mutually agreed terms, and mandates benefit sharing agreements to prevent biopiracy and exploitation. This is all great stuff, but US law currently has no direct patent protections against biopiracy, which enables exploitation throughout the US. However, throughout the world, many places have been playing their part to remove biopiracy. India, in particular, a place that has had run rampant with biopiracy, has done greatly to remove it. They established the Genetic Engineering Approval Committee by the Indian government to evaluate the morality of such activities and make decisions regarding the modification and usage of living organisms for better restrictions. Additionally, it's worth noting that the Indian government established the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library, a platform serving as a comprehensive database for patents and traditional knowledge. For example, if a lawyer wants to patent a different thing, they'll go straight to that database to check whether this plant that they want to patent has been already found or known. To end it all off, I wanted to add a different and conflicting perspective. According to Jim Chen, he claims that biopiracy doesn't exist, and that even if it did, it's a great thing. He says that the real point of the biopiracy narrative is that the global south wants its largest possible share of the world's wealth. The author implies that developing countries seek compensation for their historical contributions to biological knowledge and applications which they believe have been exploited by the wealthier North. The author also emphasizes that the sovereignty of nations over their genetic resources is great, as it enables countries to pursue economic development opportunities related to bioprospecting without external influence. By retaining control over access to genetic resources, nations can potentially benefit economically for the commercial development of biological diversity. Now it's up to you whether to decide if you want to believe in my take or Jim Chen's take. Thank you for listening, and please give me some feedback. Bye.